right, everyone, welcome back to the fifth and final video on the Skeleton Practical Review 2.0. I'm your anatomy teacher, Mr. Grippa, here at West Claremont High School, room 227. This time we are going to go to our, as I said, the fifth quiz, which is going to be over the torso, the ribs, and the pelvis. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, we've got a lot going on here, and I'll try to get this to fit in the camera. But first, let's talk about this bone right here. This is called, collectively, we have three bones, but they're all referred to collectively as the sternum. And the three parts that we have is the top portion that kind of has that pentagon shape is the manubrium of the sternum. This long middle section is called the body, and the tip down here that you have to be careful of when doing CPR, that's why they have you do the two-finger thing to find that, is called the xiphoid process. All of this cartilage that attaches ribs to the sternum is known as costal cartilage. All right, now let's talk about the difference in the ribs. Your first seven, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, are known as true ribs because they each have their own piece of cartilage that attaches them to the sternum. Ribs 8, 9, and 10 are false ribs because they share a piece of cartilage that attaches them to the sternum, unlike all the others that have their own piece. And then over here on the back, you have ribs 11 and 12, and those are not attached at all to the sternum by any cartilage. So they're known as floating ribs. So again, 1 through 7 are true ribs, 8, 9, and 10 are false ribs, and 11 and 12 are floating ribs. That takes us to this little guy right here. This one is known as the hyoid bone. And the hyoid bone is the only, here's your trivia for you, this is the only free-floating bone in the human body. It does not articulate with any other bone in your skeleton. And its only job is to provide framework for your larynx or voice box. So hyoid bone, the only two things we need to know are the greater horn, which is the tip of the U shape to the bone back here, and then these two little lower Dracula-looking fangs right here, one there and one there, are known as the lesser horn of the hyoid. So lesser horn, greater horn, hyoid bone. Next, let's go to the pelvis, and I have a disarticulated side, the middle portion, and a full pelvis right here. So first, we'll talk about this is the back portion of the pelvis known as the sacrum, and it is where you will find the tailbone or the coccyx, okay? Your pelvis is, each side has three bones. The large paddle-shaped bone is called the ilium, and you can see this roughened portion. That's where the sacrum will be. The bone down at the bottom of the butt right here is the ischium, and then this bone that is to the front is known as the pubic bone. So let's look at them on an articulated pelvis. We have pubic bone up front. Down underneath is the ischium. And then again, the large paddle-shaped bone is ilium. And then you can see I'm holding the sacrum right there, and it has the coccyx on the bottom. This pelvis happens to be from a female. We know because this angle, this arch, is greater than 90 degrees. So this is a female pelvis. All right, some of the processes we have, this big, large opening here is called the obturator foramen. The socket of the ball and socket joint for the femur is called the acetabulum. This piece of cartilage in between the two pubic bones is known as the pubic symphysis. And then on the back, we have this process here that sticks off. This is called the ischial spine, that point. And then this groove for your sciatic nerve is called the greater sciatic notch. And this ridge is the iliac crest. So again, iliac crest, ischial spine, greater sciatic notch, acetabulum, obturator foramen, pubic symphysis, pubic bone, ischium, and ilium. All right, let's go to the vertebrae. So first and foremost, there are three vertebrae, main sections of the vertebrae. We have thoracic, lumbar, and cervical. First of all cervical vertebrae are easy to identify because they have three holes. And you can see right here in this view, we have 1, 2, and 3. So this is one of the 7 cervical vertebrae that you would find in your neck. The thoracic vertebrae are usually smaller, and they have only the one hole for the spinal cord. They have larger transverse processes, but on a real one, you would see this groove here for a rib, and that tells us it's one of the 12 thoracic vertebrae. And they typically have, this is the spinous process, and usually the spinous process of the thoracic vertebrae point downward the way this one does. And then our next section, our lumbar vertebrae, they have a large body, short transverse process, no dimple for a rib. They have no ribs attached to them. There are only 5 lumbar in the lower back, and their spinous process is usually small and points backwards instead of downwards. So that's how we tell the difference between those vertebrae. And then we have 2 vertebrae that are from the cervical that are very unique, and they are atlas and axis. This is C1 and C2, atlas and axis vertebrae. So let's talk about atlas first. This is atlas, and it holds up the skull. It has no body and is a very thin body. Still has the 3 foramina, but its job is to hold up the skull, and it will articulate with axis and allow you to pivot, and forms that pivoting joint that allows you to turn your head. So this is called, this vertebrae is C2 axis, and this allows for the pivoting. So this faces to the rear, to the posterior. This will be up front, and this allows atlas to pivot around and turn your head. And its giveaway is this point, this post that sticks up right there. Instead of that flattened, rounded body, it has that point that sticks up. All right? And that is how we tell the difference between atlas, axis, and then the other 5 generic kind of cervical vertebrae. All right, and so how do we know right or left if I give you a section of pelvis? So the sacrum goes here. This is the pubic bone. It goes up front. So this has to be, since this is to the posterior, this is to the front, and we flare out this way, and we know this has to be the left. This would be the left side of the pelvis. All right, that should do it for the last video quiz. All right, that should take care of everything for quiz 5, section 5, the torso and the pelvis and the vertebrae. If you have any questions, as always, shoot me an email. Come see me, room 227. I'll talk to you guys later.